The Ram of God Trilogy. Story 2. Saint RamZ and the Lost Soul. Introduction. The lost soul, like a moth to the flame. This young lady had her wings burned to a crisp. By her own reckless behavior, a life she had ruined. Making this Saint RamZ's second adventure a well-constructed mystery from the darkest realm, a tale of redemption. For RamZ, the saintly hero dedicates himself to be one of the most enduring icons in today's fictional comic book world. Since inception, Leo DeLone's life story had been scripted. From his birth he was destined to be the Almighty's Ram of God, the Light. When a superior power, a white magnificent beam, lights up the way and hope begin for all of what is to be mankind and creation. Faith shines through the smallest vestige of prayer like a beacon's lighthouse. We watch faith's glowing radiance break through the fury of the dark clouds from above. With amazing grace, inspiration, and optimism for what is to be a rewarding path. Grace speaks of an eternity through the pearly gates of heaven. This story is about a young woman, Armada Verduzco, who unknowingly follows a forbidden road. Her spirit of innocence interprets an unholy situation as being best meaning, never factoring a bargain with Mr. Evil, the darkest of angels and deliverer of the underworld, amply named Enlil. Still filled with desire, Armada felt that any decision she made would affect the rest of her life and lost soul for all eternity. But what gave her a glimmer of hope on the horizon, she knew in vivid detail. Were the moments in the studio and on stage that suddenly illuminated the career in her? Once again guided by her talent, she would triumph. When in this unexplained mystery she meets up with the demonic world, and her struggle begins between the darkness and the light. Even with a stern stone faith, it would still take Saint RamZ some time to gain Armada's trust and lure her away from an almost shadowy end. Only to find infinitely she always had the power within her. To know the way that was guided by the supreme power and light from above, God. By Frank Verduzco Lopez. Chapter 1. The Lost Soul. Through an opening in the dark, moving clouds ascending down over the city of Phantasma, amid the flashing and raging lightning storm, the bold figure of Saint RamZ appeared to be silhouetted. Against the thunderous atmospheric electricity discharge in the air around him, when he seemed to saddle into one of the turrets of the famous Chrysler Building. Glorifying, grandiose but not pompous, he made a fist and pressed the ram ring on his finger. With an exceptional powerful vision, he was to a bird of prey peering down below as a protector and defender over the city that loved him so. By the early dawn all was well, and a new day had begun with the noisy bustle of the streets and traffic. There has always been a fascination about this man. He was so inviting, so exciting and saintly. To many of his adoring fans and cores of beckoning young women acting in sensuality like purring felines waiting to be pleasured and not in a spiritual way. Saint RamZ will always show his admiration to the peoples of Phantasma, and so it was on this day. Far away to the drum beats across the ocean to a land where monarchs once ruled. San Sebastian, Spain. The Tamborada event began as part of the local carnival long before it had become a tradition to celebrate the patron saint's day. With the paparazzo, the freelance photographers who aggressively pursue celebrates, likened to Federico Fellini's 1959 film, La Dolce Vita, taking candid photos. Nothing was as public as being too private and forced to repeat their charades again and again. As for the model and flamenco dancer of days past, Armada Verduzco remained unappreciated talent in her own country. Caught like a tiny fly in a silken web, and a career that had spiraled downhill. Ever since her much-adored painter and mentor Salvador Dali had died. Within a year she'd gone through a small inheritance left by the painter's estate. Armada had become an unwelcomed guest and resident at the Maria Cristina Luxury Hotel. Now amid the big Tamborada drum parade on the streets of San Sebastian, the yearly kick-off on January 20th. In the Plaza de la Constitución, where the city's colorful flag is raised and the drum roll festivities began, at the loud sounding of the drum majorette's whistle. With no more stomach left for survival if she could just fade away in peace. Grieving with abandonment, and no new-found refuge, saddened Armada left the sanctity of San Sebastian's Cathedral of the Good Shepherd. Shoveling her steps on the hard concrete sidewalk among the late evening's crowd of people, she was overcome by thoughts of suicide. Disheveled and dazed, she took a taxicab contemplating her death. Perhaps the friends at the Temple of the Night Life, the Discoteca La Rotunda, would miss her otherwise compelling qualities as being one of theirs. The club was located near La Concha Beach, where it was common to find the most famous faces of Europe and heirs to family fortunes. Armada was used to the reaction of friends who found her unexpectedly on their doorstep. But now, gathering up all her emotions and thoughts, she glared out the taxicab's window. Her tear-stained face expressed her state of mind. In the bewilderment, Armada now envisioned Don Quixote's windmills of La Mancha, her birthplace, and their billowing white sails against a blue sky. With the loud sounds of Spanish gypsy music playing and the hypnotic clicking rhyme of the castanets, part of an old dance tradition. Visibly torn, Armada no longer held a fascination for her Moorish, Castilian heritage as the taxicab moved swiftly through the busy streets and the festivities of the Tamborada celebration, where old and young walked past fancy boutiques filled with innovative sport design gear and surpassing inimitable bold Spanish fashions. It was the tourist time of year. The calles/streets were filled with the marchers and visitors alike on bicycles, private cars, taxicabs, and buses. Her story had grown wings in a beguiling world and influenced by the activities of the area. There was no reason left for her to purchase a tourist's first-class ticket on a high-speed train to Paris, France. When suddenly, by mental telepathy, Armada found herself being dropped off by the cab driver at the foot of the Maria Cristina Bridge that overlooked the Urumia River and passed through her beloved Basque city. Was this to be her death sentence? She could not find any solace and had resigned to the echoing voices inside her head. Perhaps there were cries from Mecca, a summons to prayer by a muezzin in a minaret alongside a white mosque. In the thirst for salvation, she thrust off her silken embroidered black veil into the abyss of the night breeze. Closing her dark eyes, she leaped off the bridge into the Urumia River's cold and unforgiving waters. Her lost soul screamed as if for mercy to the heavens above. If the fall did not break her bones, she will have drowned in the primal moving waters of the wide river that runs out into the Cantabrian Sea on the Bay of Biscay. But in the unfathomable and strangeness of the nightfall, all was fearless and innocently receptive to human compassion, unlike any other place on this earth. In the wake of Armada's plunge into the dark, hellish waters of the river, a school of medieval mermaids heard a willful splash beneath the bridge's pier. In the frolicking, soaking in the moon's rays, they had stopped their synchronized nightly swimming activities to discover another young Spanish woman had tried to end her life. But this time the sea nymphs chose to intervene with physical powers of their own. No one gains by a drowning death. These supernatural beings could not let her sink into the fathom of a deep, watery grave, or the shallow substrates of the Spanish coastline, where the tide fluctuated in the new dawn, and early morning sounds of crashing foaming sea waves rushing to shore as noisy seagulls filled the sky. In the abrupt and surprised awakening, Armada Verduzco found her semi-nude body had floated for miles onto La Concha Beach. In a tangled bed of smelly seaweed, she had cried out for some help over the disagreeable dead squid odor. Her raven silken hair, her dark eyes, her breath, and her nose just could not stand a bit of the noxious rot. Was this how she must meet with her new sentence, and demands a clause in a contract made by the mermaids? Not yet in her right frame of both body and mind, Armada remembered their celestial singing and incantations, rendered in a set of silvery words and bewitching trances casting a magic spell. whereupon she was never to age a day, a new life marred and caught in limbo. Under a futile and surreal embodiment that depicted her incarnated spirit and form. Facing the ramification that comes from suicide and the accidental consequences complicating her now insuperable existence, Armada felt gifted for the moment, but not totally invincible, although her monetary position had improved financially. Despite the months that followed, Armada in her hard-headedness had taken steps to leave Spain. In a formal way she had arranged for a passport and the purchase of a new wardrobe for what was to be a long voyage. Sailing to the northeast, the vast luxury cruise ship the America rolled noticeably on the growing dark swells of Cantabrian Sea, soon to be crossing the vast Atlantic Ocean. Sitting alone in the first-class lounge of the ship, Armada felt. The huge vessel rolls ponderously over the deep ocean waters. Far from the edge, and thought she barely noticed the brutish waiter in his red, white and blue uniform, holding out a fresh wine glass balanced on a tray as he moved away. When a middle-aged man had taken a seat beside hers, "I'm Dr. George Winters," the silver-haired man phrased, sipping her wine. "You have the pleasure, sir," Armada replied, feeling he had made a target of her, as she was one of the shapelier young women on board. "Some of us are held up in our cabins tonight," he stated. The weathered folds and lines on his face said it all, the tentacles reaching out more amorous than an octopus. "If you'll excuse me, Dr. Winters, I must go take Destiny by the hand and speak with the handsome Captain Hawk up on the bridge. Careful, the wind is brisk and gusting, could be a warning of chilling days to come." He sounded harassing. "Are you trying to be funny?" she asked, cutting the conversation short. "Oh, no, I'm just messing with your head," he smiled bluntly. "I'll try not to think about the danger," Armada said, and thought that was some bullshit. He had an owlish nose with the P5 tour of Old Crow. In the garish illumination the world became utterly cold, but as long as the big ocean liner was at sea, she could rest and relax, speaking metaphorically. Her journey would end soon enough over any weather concerns as a flash of lightning forked across the horizon like a bad omen. Where the sea and the storm melted into the darkness, the turbulence shook her insides as she saw her reflection on the glass window. Armada Verduzco was not ready to relinquish her new life to be. She tried to remain attentive and alert, for her arrival was not going to be some ticker-tape parade, and knew she must be ready to sing her own praises. Chapter 2. Sailing to America. In recent months a vigorous culture boom swept the city of Phantasma. The art world had taken on a new look at the Metro Museum. There were variety, beauty, wisdom and innocence inside and out on the city streets. To read about the fanciful and exuberant masterful architect Antonio Gaudí, who left a large monumental legacy to his country of Spain. Now, since acclaimed heirs of the Salvador Dali family have offered the city's museum curator, Don Leo de Leon, a most lucrative and highly unpresented private collection showing. It was to be a big, stupendous canvas for the arts. While the fall weather approaches and all the local critics who thought to be somebody sounded eager to make the scene, all were anxiously waiting the unveiling of this new season over at the Metro Museum. In this enlightening, combined with striking banners and images of Salvador Dali plastered about the walls, that added drama and new perspective to the Spanish-born surrealist painter and his wealthy estate. Inspired by Mother Nature, he left the best and last of his unfinished masterpiece to the Metro Museum. Dali's influence led to a definitive style and an affinity for naturalism and specific geometric forms. Globally, because of the internet, the news made caption. The valuable gallery collection sailed directly from his homeland of Spain to the New World, as did Christopher Columbus in 1492. Cushioning, the new addition to the revenue-generating mechanism, a luminous wooden black coffin thought to be carrying the skeletal pathos, the bony torso of Salvador Dali. that would languish over the throng of art patrons as part of the valuable collection. Striking a tribute to one of the greatest abstract artists of all time, the collection would include a wealth of information, such as his biography and surreal lifestyle photos. In the presentation of Armada Verduzco, a young model, flamenco and castanet dancer from the region of Andalusia, his southern Spain. When the sailing ship the America docked in Fantasma's harbor, the reporters confirmed the rumors were true. The female companion whom shared the last 4 years of Dali's life had traveled alongside his artistic works. Sending a blast off to the year's 2 biggest charity events, the American Cancer and Heart Fund Disease sponsored by the Metro's Art Museum exhibit. This night gripped in climax, the earthly delight of Fantasma flickers like a mythical place, crowed and diverse as the people who created it. Under a flag of prestige, the immorality runs deep and wide even for those of who are not involved in these activities. While in the arena of public arts it seemed plausible that the museum business would put a premium on curiosity behind the scene. In a certain broadness of perspective, voyeuristic appetites fostered by a life of saintly purity at this ribbon-cutting celebration as Don Leo de Leon faced a daunting challenge. Assumed by their facial expressions, the family of Salvador Deli looked smug, self-righteous, and a breed apart as protocol forced them to be indomitable. Behind them stood their rival and unwelcomed Armada Verduzco. She appeared young and ghostly white. The whole perspective was hazy as there was much unforeseen betrayal in the Grand Gala gallery opening. On the calendar, speaking of fundraisers, Leo de Leon had seen his fair share of late-night cocktail receptions, black-tie dinners, public auctions and artist performances. With new energy, new ideas and a few strong cocktails under his belt. Let's face it, I'm not so commonplace, yet I don't accept the responsibility of role model, Leo said famously to his critics. Just because I'm in the public spotlight on principle. I have no inherent responsibility to live an exemplary life and have others modeled their own lives after mine. Having said that, I do realize that alone doesn't solve the debate. He crowed and considered, then shook his head. The reporters and news crews laughed among the notables there. Armada too felt a connection upon arriving in Fantasma, but nothing ever goes as planned or just jumping the gun. Leo, I find the crucifixion deviates from the traditional portrait of Jesus Christ. An older woman called to his attention like a mutual admiration society. The people that believe in the Messiah are often threatened by the established order, Mrs. Smith, Leo replied in jest. Standing in front of the canvas cabaret scene, a high-fashion model called Booty exclaimed, "It's a bit cubistic like my life." "He is a surrealist, cubism, and modern art?" She sounded disturbed or wanted a response. "He is Dada, a man with an amazing sense of humor," Leo joked as he looked around the room and noticed how the art connoisseurs were enjoying themselves over the trays of wine and cheeses. "Well, no cheap thrills, it's all highbrow here." "I need a drink?" Booty replied, returning her idle gaze to Leo as if to keep a close eye on him. "The Mysteries of the Rosary, it's snappy, chic and slightly eccentric. What a pity that it was never finished. A lonely figure in an ankle-length white cloak, Dali has such depth of energy around her," a critic stated, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Still it is full of charm and very popular. The strong light of hope gives a dramatic impact to his inspiring work, a man of true cultivated taste." In addition to being an internationally recognized authority and critic on protocol, he was hoping to capitalize on his new book entitled Culture of Guppies. "Mr. Stevenson, you have what it takes to walk like a critic and talk like a critic," a woman said, thumbing her nose as a true believer. A dozen people clustered around the painting and watched with great interest. "There is no magic pill but plenty of positive thinking." Like a priceless masterpiece, this painting was an instant classic, a tale that would progress and become increasingly clear to the people of Fantasma. Mr. Stevenson had decoded the mystery of the lady in the painting with his basic instincts. Armada Verduzco had become the hottest female and newest arrival in Phantasma. With eyes wide open, the lush lifestyle at the top level would soon be a lonely road full of pitfalls at her every turn. If only her life had been better timed, she would have something to live for. Armada now felt like a ghost peering in, more rueful and bewildered than before under the circumstances. It had been her own experience to keep silent. Usually the best way. Most people tend to fear the unknown when they don't understand. Leo actually turned and looked around them all, a little wary, realizing the hair on his neck stood up like a warning flag. Armada seductively studied him for a moment with a strong impulse that they should both leave. Psychic and with no idea why, she felt a threat directed at them both. Her dark eyes seemed almost dreamy. "I'm not sure, but do we have plenty of security?" "Why? Have you seen something?" He frowned, unfocused for a moment. Armada didn't know what to say and smiled, keeping his gaze on her face. "Are you clairvoyant or just telepathic?" Leo asked again. "Sorry. No abilities here." Her mouth twisted slightly. "I can't believe I'm having this conversation," he told her. "Why? You generally ask permission?" She thought about her sarcastic inner voice that had to ask. "Lots of people have weird energy and can put thoughts into heads. Not me, I don't even see auras. Well, I believe in morning meditations, it keeps me humble that way." Chapter 3. The Charity Ball. The moment was set for all-out glamour as the PM hours started to roll past. The opulence of evening began as Armada indulged in the lap of luxury. She wore a long smoky jade cloak over an evening dress, while observing the towering skyline through the large arched glass picture window of her high-rise penthouse suite. Deceptively cool, Armada knew it was no pipe dream. While strong forces propelled her to new heights, her followers on Facebook would pay top dollar once again to catch a glimpse of her mere presence at this private event. Outside, the hotel elevator momentarily caught off guard by a horde of press photographers, and their dangling cameras flashing excitedly away at her sophisticated image. Remarkably, if what Miss Verduzco had to say sounded good, it was the mood of the artful times. Entertaining the throng of news reporters who cleverly field grapevine questions to her and her new relationship with the dashing Metro Museum curator? I would love to lance the boil of ignorance that surrounds this type of question, but for the record, I've known a few magpie gentlemen who shoot the breeze too freely about their involvement with me, as some insiders would term. She laughed. The straight dope is that Mr. De Leon is one of the most brilliant of people and new friend I've had the pleasure to know. So, when he asked if I'd considered preforming at the American Cancer Benefit, I answered, I dare anyone to try and stop me. She phrased over the scent of her own perfumed body. Well, Armada, why are we all waiting here? This will be the biggest social event on the calendar scene this year, a reporter shouted famously as she moved slowly yet deliberately through the crowded lobby of the Trump Hotel. A black chauffeur soon appears at her side, both to shield and propel her to the awaiting limo. A few blocks away, a well-known hostess and socialite, Zimma De Leon, was this year's co-chair for the American Lung Cancer and Heart Fund Ball. Inside the Biltmore Hotel, her grandson Leo De Leon was on the committee M.C. ING. He was to open the show of 16 awards in the entertainment field, theater, sports and fashion, with dinner and auction to follow the benefit for the foundation. It was the most colorful time of the year. Broadway was on parade every evening with its neon flickering billboards alongside the busy boulevard of many broken dreams. Like Hannibal, all the guests sat around white linen tables and feasted on a romance's meal. In the narrative, the night's feathered entertainer appeared like an original long-running Broadway production. Greeted by a loud wave of applause was imagery setting for Armada Verduzco. For Armada was truly the lady in red, Her glamour races in a long strapless gown engagingly detailed, a shirred bodice that gently sweeps into a multi-tiered flounce exited by a cascade of ruffles accented with a bow on the low back. Dressed appropriately for her flamenco performance, embodied by a complex cultural of baile dance steps, which included singing, guitar playing, while the sounds of the hypnotic castanets emphasized emotion over libido in her well-polished manicured hands. Like the movements in a Swiss watch telling time, she danced a vocabulary of steps as if two different languages that required intense focus, commitment, and investment, but the modern choreographic brought improvisation, ruling out her ever becoming the next Carmen Amaya clone. It was a new age, a new time that casts out all the old prejudices with fewer taboos. But the joke was that there were still plenty of bigots left to go around. Momentarily her brief attention was drawn to the maître d' waiter, who was about to flambe a crepe Suzette as she said, "It's an exciting evening, more mine than anyone else's, and it will be a complete success, as you, my friends the critics, will write about in big bold print. My thanks to you all, I am quickly becoming a distinguished presence in your beautiful city." Her brightly colored lips pressed into a smile. Leo was aware of a sharp disappointment at her words. She had been so sure that this evening would see the end of her deceit, for she had to admit it was that. The night's electricity sparked the air around them with energy. In school days past, love was a game she always played to win. So, she knew she had to find a way to get him on her side. Whatever he's heard about her may have been a pack of lies and could affect the rest of her life. By increasing her exposure underneath the bright lights, she had activated new quips about herself. In his eyes she may not be his equal. The truth was self-evident as Armada pursued her own happiness. On this night as she left the event, Leo sat inside his candy apple-red Porsches, with tinted windows rolled up, the CD player wailing, both hands on the steering wheel and his shoulders reared back. Seemingly the way to measure a man's success was by the kind of car he can afford to buy. It was no small irony Armada felt she's between the cradle and grave. As her rented limo pulled away, spreading the embarrassment of a face-to-face with Mr. De Leon quick exit. "Wow," she said. "I was right." The moment was like a small pebble dropping into a pool of water. Very serious ripples were set in motion, and could not be misconstrued as a media event which put a damper at the end of a balmy night. Chapter 4. Armada and the Saint. The shock of the unknown, the power of one man suited up. And how far would he go to create a measured event at the appointed time over the starry skies of Phantasma? The nights were grotesque and frightening. The Bishop Kelly's committee had been meeting with the diocese. There was a 911 helpline over in the nuns' rookery. A hotline had been launched. The program was a network of support offering advocacy information on the shapeshifters and what appeared to be the walking dead. This was the help for the test God had given them. The situation ranged from callers dealing with people and pets in haunting or threatening situations within Phantasma's metropolitan areas. Where the police were too busy, the nuns and volunteers arranged transportation for the poor and homeless in shelters. Their rescue mission would not be turned into a dog and pony show. Armada entered the Spanish Baroque-style cathedral. She could see and feel its Moorish influence of St. Timothy's mosaic ceiling. The small pieces of colored glass and stone made her homesick for Spain and its rich history. No more fleeting glances in any direction. The dark arts were about the pantheism, a doctrine that equates God with the forces and laws of the supernatural realm. The darkness and the light brought into focus, as anthology revealed the hidden world from the past to the present. In Armada's mind, haunted by evening shadows that sooner would destroy her, but seeing life in daylight with truly open eyes. There is sadness in the faces of the people walking past her on the street. Warning or welcoming, the shadows of the leaves, tree branches and power lines filtering down to the ground from the sunlight sky. Over at the convent, Mother Superior was no alchemist examining the holy sphere of church life. In the messiness and irony of things, she most relished the private memories of young Leo's past childhood, flipping baseball cards in the air and drinking Kool-Aid from a straw. Paper airplanes, the little prizes in cereal boxes, his most moving moments. But as an old sister, teary-eyed and dignified for her age, with a passion that could not be contained, watching Leo's growing frustration together with the rest of the sisterhood, wondering how long it would hold. Their past arguments have been quietly building up in spirit. What secrets of this young woman's past hold for their Saint RamZ? In her thoughts and observation, she prayed regarding Leo's world and remarkable character that he alone must cross in an intricate and unexpected way. She realized there's a lot more going on and struggles to accept the new reality and what lies ahead. With looming dark shadows from the past Saint RamZ races, willfully acting from a much stronger moral position. Knowing all his intricate maneuvers, short routes, back alleys and side streets to get to places quicker. Facing fierce rivals, his adrenaline runs fast on this summer evening, casting gloom on crack dealers, prostitutes and lurking gang members. But finding a heaven where you don't expect it. In a survival instinct spanning the months, lost and frightened Armada Verduzco slips and falls. With a loud, clear scream in the nuance, the sound of her voice hung in the air. A mind game in the art of movement, as Saint RamZ reappeared. In their first meeting, in shocking face-to-face like a new dimension, standing distinguishingly in the dark pool of a shadow. Fashionably, this dark angel, soulless and ghostly white-skinned, slipped and fell at his feet, or so it seemed. On the brink of greatness, extending her slender arms and hands upward, their fingers were just inches apart. Armada eased up given the disarray she was in. He was no average schmo, their body language indicated something more than a chat. The shadows were always to his advantage. That it hardly counted of his holy abilities without holding a finger on more than a dangerous threat. The criminals knew what he was capable of. Saint RamZ may have saved Armada at least what she lacks in faith, the very strength to take on evil or anything she willed. But she had her limits, just as the rest of us. Despite the weaknesses and vulnerabilities, she certainly felt all powers and not invincible at the moment. "Good evening, miss," Saint RamZ said without hesitation. His angular face looked as if it had been carved from a marble block. She smiled. The play of the street lights above Armada magnified her eyes and ghostly beauty. She heard melancholy violin music in her head, still feeling dazed, as he had helped her up to her feet. Her eyes narrowed again. "I hope I've not seen the end of you?" He conjured another smile just as faint as before. "I could hardly deny you. Or could I? As a courtesy, would I trust you to keep me advised?" She offered with a wave of her hand, and knew clearly that the meeting was not over. This man could be on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine, she thought for a moment. He was tall, maybe 6'4", young and with a nicely chiseled body. It seemed clear that the darkness knew of him at least as she, or even quite better. As Saint RamZ tracked and watched about Phantasma's citizenry in the late hours, he joined the flow, dodging traffic and disappearing, crossing the busy street, horns blaring and cars swerving around him. Saint RamZ had made his way to the subway with a brisk energy. Times Square had never appeared more garish and usual after dark. The flashing neon of the jumbo-torn billboard screens, the wide-eyed tourists from every country on the globe taking pictures, street performers in outrageous colorful costumes playing for money. A street cop on horseback pointed people to Broadway as the wishing hour approached midnight. Armada Verduzco raised her well-manicured hand to hail a cab. She took great comfort in the knowledge that he was unable to read her mind. And that gave her much pause, with emotions riding high. Not that it mattered now. Still, she became blessedly quiet thinking about his handsome image and striking hazel eyes that made it even a more memorable night. When all of the bad stuff comes crawling from the dark and resists, she manages to hold on to her innocence with compassion despite the horror that followed. Chapter 5. Sign of the Antichrist. After a hard rain the clouds parted and out came the full moon, ridding the quiet wet night. In the creepy mist that bombarded the streets below, a stranger appeared, a dark angel perhaps, or the Antichrist himself. What set this man apart from certain men was a sense of real style and attitude. His apparel and good grooming added to the drama and flair of the night. In virtual silence, clutching a laptop and a violin case, he glanced at his Rolex watch, entering the Trump Tower Hotel making a favorable impression. Although not understanding the humor in the lobby, the uncontrollable and loud laughter of the guests. He was a wolf in wolf's clothing? And not all villains are grotesque. He appeared to be pondering something. Despite himself, he smiled, acknowledging those whom dared to gawk. Armada Verduzco stepped into the hotel elevator, amused and bemused at the timing. Endel's silvery banter was spectacular. His sexiness went beyond the powerful man, a price for selling one's soul. There were sensitivity and sexuality, but also strength. The man was at his best. There are so many beautiful women in this world, and tonight I meet one? No offense, you can't be rational, sir. She sounded deeply flawed and nodded unwillingly. I hope that my primal impulse or my misleading biases did not leave you facing a mastodon. His laughter made sport of her like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a villain on a mission. I undertook the challenging work of the violinist, having mastered one of Beethoven's pieces. I understand perfectly. I'm devoted to dance with a passion, she said, like a deeply romantic tale. I'm not a musical genius or professor, but perhaps I may entertain you one evening? He pondered the idea. Armada shook her lovely head. I'm not an experiment, or some idiot that's here to tempt fate. There was this emotional scar in her voice even the Versace gown could not disguise or spike her adrenaline. Well, it's my floor, she said, utterly elusive when an unfamiliar jolt of profound uneasiness came over her. Please don't think me a snippy salesman. I'm not the most logical of man, but I hope we meet soon. He showed more ego, as she smiled, distinguishing fact from fiction. Unconsciously Armada assumed he was more virtuous. Her heart rate had jumped, but nothing bad had happened. This came on the heels of some demonic play at work. Did he represent a new benevolent power? It was not outlandish to envision, but once you start to scrutinize a life-death decision and the passing of time, pissing off art snobs was daunting, but she could not push it down the throats of others. That would be a bad idea. On the spiritual side, the appearance of this man was no accident, but a phenomenon, an added mystery like a sci-fi drama. Endel's coming held special meaning when you explore the impact of the strange meteor fireball that appeared over the night sky and coincided with the appearance of a middle-aged man dressed in white. A Mr. Galilee, a godly man who may be some sort of heavenly messenger, but not the Messiah. An angel with no wings and deep blue eyes and what seems to be a voice from a higher realm. In Phantasma's insulated atmosphere he had crossed paths with the Black Angel in an intricate and unexpected way. While a highly spiritual and respected priest in his superficially mindset was privy to his most inner thoughts, dream-like perceptive observation of harmfully bad characters. Chapter 6. The Visionary. Father Riley, a progressive priest always battling both the small-minded Catholic Church hierarchy and his debilitating headaches that came with UFO visions. Riddled with regret and indecision, the Holy Father spots the mysterious stranger in the crowd and warns Don Leo de Leon, with assurance that he must be related to a similar man in his dreamlike visions that left a disquieting effect on him. Obsessed with meeting this man for reasons he still did not even understand. The evening services became more necessary than before, a calming for the times. to focus his mind and condition it as God required of him. This living hell experienced by pain that was relived over again. The horrible blackouts he accepted almost apologetically, or what the church had to gain by it. Meanwhile, Leo de Leon finds himself embroiled in silly gossip and innuendo tied to young Spanish lady by some unhappy parishioners who may have visited the museum gallery. In the atmosphere-driven night, Leo seeks guidance from Father Riley, who could only give him bits and pieces of his dream puzzle visions. In the short matter of time, the visions became more numerous, a secret too complex to hide. Only he knew of the terrifying scope. It was like waking from a deep coma. He was having psychic abilities that could not be controlled. It was what now had changed his life and played evil mind games. The menacing bad dreams and breathtaking nightmares he couldn't outrun or escape from. With unshakable foresight in his blind panic, he felt an inevitable death, and these were troubled imaginings. The Holy Father dreading his bed like unresolved issue from the past, a conspiracy in an evil silence with a price as he dared to breathe a word to Leo and the Church. Even with the help of the bishop, Father Riley was outnumbered and the conditions were running out in Phantasma. Father Riley, now a psychic operative, who now followed the trial of his deadly misfortune. With Andal the villain that haunted his dreams? This fascinated Leo de Leon with all the suspense of the newly appearance of a man called Anvil. Father, I soon will have the opportunity to meet with this charismatic being in your visions, Leo explained. That's what driving me nuts, Leo, he replied bluntly. Okay, but get some rest, Father. Tomorrow everything will be clearer. I'll catch a nap later. I have some work to do. He shook his head. Leo had found Father Riley extremely cooperative, as he went walking home in the late dismal evening. There was no time to perfect Father's vision or refine the surreal. That ran out on the streets as news reporters and the paparazzi cameras had gone nuts. The news did not stop the stories that kept being heard between late-night talk radio and its listeners, who had various experiences in the wee hours of the heat-scorching nights. The Catholic Church used the Bible to try and explain what the My Five Trias Salvador Dali works of art had to do with the shapeshifters at nightfall and the not-so-spiritual art event. The parishioners had so many questions of Father Riley that it got under his skin. It challenged the citizens of Phantasma to think differently in new terms of what the dark forces were about. Why the visit? Are they here for good? You didn't have to be religious to believe. The news media had a healthy skepticism and ran wild with the storyline. Science meets the supernatural. Under the full moon, evil stalks about our streets. Resembling a classic Alfred Hitchcock thriller, the darkness took on the landscape and the creepy expressionistic shadows. For anyone prowling about, the silence in the night air was deadly as an investigative reporter tracing the trail of corpses to a suspicious funeral home, where it was said that a cult of devil worshippers performed their satanic blood rituals, teetering on the brink of madness, and that they ate human flesh, cannibalism. In the eerie quiet of Phantasma, only a few lights illuminated 4 of the stained glass windows of the church. Glancing towards the eastern sky, it would be a few hours before the grayish beginnings of a new day. Father Riley locked the doors and retreated silently as he came. Chapter 7. The Big Chill. With bizarre visions and the clairvoyant experiences of Father Riley's, Bishop Kelly and Mother Superior sat in the chapel's side office. In the odd circumstances, the church was left to put the pieces of this frightening puzzle together, trying to unravel the forces of evil between the psychic abilities of Father Riley and this Mr. Andal's relationship, shocked and astounded them. The Holy Mother exclaimed, clasping her hands together to keep from hugging the bishop's backside. Like many of his Irish countrymen, Father Riley has always been a strong believer in the sixth sense. It has alerted him to danger more than once. His dreams and advance warnings have spared him and others much grief. The bishop's brows rose. I fear retribution. His able to sense bad intentions or presence, certainly an uneasy thought. The Reverend Mother smiled faintly. Horrifying enough to give a veteran priest the promise of many nightmares to come. But where there is little hope there is vindication. Oh, worshipful Lord, I would not be sorry to see our enemies crumble beneath our Saint RamZ feet, the bishop said as the large bells of St. Timothy rang loudly over the chapel grounds. In a flash of admiration, Mother Superior replied, Bishop Kelly, I must go and look in on our sisters who are working on commission embroidery altar cloth for Abuela Zima's private chapel. Gratefully her long, thick, curling lashes turned and looked in the direction of the bishop's gaze and froze emotionally, charged. With a surprising blend of suspense and humor, the bishop said, The seekers are out there, and they are down a lonely stretch, standing between the shadows. When the buzz of the day gives way to the rise of the moon, things will start to happen. It can get a little scary from midnight till dawn. Perhaps you should go now, Mother. The bishop muttered. The word of God was born out of our own starvation, he stated, putting his suspicions to rest. A lump came into her throat. Mother Superior understood his thoughts. With a passion and a peace of mind, she hurried out of the chapel like one exposed nerve on her heel. Nothing was going to get their hooks into her, at least not completely. Chapter 8. Mother's Womb. In a labor of pain, immoral forces were at play. The illuminating glow of the city of Phantasma served as a beacon on satellite, inviting them to come. Along with the gathering of the Earth's own dark creatures, from Mother Earth's own womb, tarantulas climbed the sides of walls. Bats roost on the sides of old tall buildings. Snakes and tree frogs invading Central Park. All that was left was the smell of rotten corpses filling the muggy air. The scene was riveting. A sadness and fury hung over Armada Verduzco like a suspenseful thriller, even if the mystery at its heart is somewhat inert. Already over her head, she has no idea how much worse things could get for the bidding of her lost soul. Once Spain's former golden girl in a richly layered life of art, she managed to keep the oddities quiet. Now being investigated by the local press and media not buying it, but like a hotbed of intrigue, Armada was not washed up. She had under lock and keys a diary about her life with Salvador Dali and after his death. How she found herself on a sandy shore after supposedly committing suicide. As if walking through a looking glass, it doesn't take long for Leo de Leon to uncover the dark conspiracies of evil waiting for her lost soul on a platter. Still inside his own head, he wonders if he's about to lose his soul for uncovering Anvil's nightmare. True to his nature, he experienced the entire cycle of Anvil, the dark angel of death. That defies some unspoken law in the world-changing order from the dark side and pagan-worshipping heathens. Deeply twisted and brilliantly incisive, Mr. Anvil provides the cornucopia of what is evil. There was an almost eerie quiet from the crickets and bullfrogs calling from the pond's edge and other summer sounds. Armada and Leo de Leon enter the world of the nightlife. Maxine's a ritzy night club and proprietor Maxine of Paris. Now an older woman, she was from an era where beauty was everything, luxury a way of life and romance a secret rendezvous. Now her famous club lights up the nightlife where patrons are seduced by the intrigue of the hour, the destiny of the moment. Enter the world of Maxine's where spirit and style are in glorious balance. Created for people who love to be noticed or captured in Art Nouveau-inspired decadence as they are succumbed to the pursuit of worldly pleasures. With many of the patrons who sat around, sipping cold exotic drinks in an inviting atmosphere overlooking the floor show and upbeat entertainment. Still, Maxine had just turned a mere 85 years old and no longer very naughty. Creases in her blue dress and sticking flower 5 through her hair that was dyed a shocking shade of pink, mingled with a bit of gray. Looking more than middle-aged, a big bow sits perhaps too prettily on one of her shoulders, but particularly provocative. Here I am looking like a fine mess. What's the matter with you, Leo de Leon? Has the cat got your tongue? Well, if you don't like the beat, then don't play with the drum. She winked, sliding her arm onto his shoulder, with her all too aggressive manners. I like your forwardness, Maxine, he said, keeping a stiff upper lip inflection. My best of friends always do. She laughs. Along with all my apparent flamboyance, but I actually don't think I fit into any category. She smiled at Armada, giving her the once-over. One could only say you are a very unusual lady. Happy B-Day, Leo said, glancing at Armada, speaking in that warm, vibrant voice of his. His compliment had importance, for it had taken the place of a more heartfelt sentiment. Armada's eyes grew suddenly misty. Her love seemed determined to elude him. It was as though he reminded her that she had no real lasting place in his life. Suddenly she wanted the noise and gaiety. She wanted to get lost in a happy, thoughtless crowd, where she might not see or hear him as an echoing voice. Her mind kept telling her she was not wanted by the man she had grown to love. Excusing herself away to the lady's boudoir, she was one of those people who knew in her innermost being that loving was living and giving for the sake of love. Leo watched her pass through the long open glass doors under the dim light. There was a wistful curve to his mouth as he waited. You can always bet on the champagne and fun lasting out to the early morning. Maxine had every right to look pleased with the success of her club. Yes. It's a wealth of magnificence, popularity. Armada saw Leo in conversation at the table and approached him. In her gold French laine gown she felt lissom and cool. Have we come to have fun this evening? She asked in such cynicism. Yes. It's good to hear your voice once again, he replied. Must you always be so polite? She laughed on the wings of desire. I won't say, he quipped. And I don't easily crack under pressure. And you have no fear of me. I suppose that's an outrageous statement? She asked in a cheery humanism. I think that at the very least there is a premise for debate about it, he said self-righteously. But living the good life is as easy as dressing for the part. I suppose so. Nothing or no one should be taken for granted. Paranoia is a stable of adjustment. Leo pondered. In one critic's own words, the crowded, grimy streets of the garment factory district are a world away from the red carpet splendor, but suddenly my future lie in the hands of Saint RamZ, who is not like the boy next door but ideologically as remote. Breathless Armada sat wide-eyed and wrapped in a black mink coat, with both her red-gloved hands gripping tightly to the velvet seat. Your awareness is particularly sharp in the wake of this evening. But just ignore the matter, for you will not get any nourishment out of that. I know you are trying to be helpful, and it is reassuring you sharing concern in me coping. I have enjoyed tonight. I never thought I'd see the day of wine and roses. Now I must sleep on it, she stated, feeling sultry, seductive, and sexy. Armada was flirtatious and feminine, frivolous and fun, miraculously engineered her plan. You're a peculiar timepiece, he said by her significant moments. Is that what you think of me, a beautiful instrument, or the ultimate time machine? Yes, and endowed with the power to defy time and a spell to one's eyes. A smart statement requires the proper punctuation to triumph in dignity. Some men are made of sterling silver and others of solid gold. So you see, I can't be fooled by an imitation. Don't dive too deeply, there could be something snorkeling a lot deeper. He sounded like a man in mint condition. Nature can take many spectacular forms if you'll just let yourself expand the imagination. Are you partial to the ones that bite? He asked on impulse. Do I look like a love-struck indigo snake? She said surprisingly. Hardly. I'd like to survive the wild primordial things. He joked. I don't care to be tussled in a dirt pit if it isn't enough to smell good. Armada certainly had a mind, and well, as they say, she thought of Leo as a much welcome vein of opulently, a man and family with too much money and influence to care about others. The sun is slowly sinking on the horizon. Leo's pulse was in the red zone. All this stunned his six senses. Saint RamZ must stop the unstoppable, for Armada Verduzco was always the same, beautiful, intelligent, and a confident female able to gain his trust to do her bidding. In the unthinkable, a cloud of darkness has terrified all the inhabitants of Phantasma, where heinous evil is not supposed to happen. The police chief Hogan has no idea, and the FBI is asked for their top profiler to help. In the silence of the night, Leo stumbled from his bed as the full moon beamed through the open curtains. He asked for reasons he couldn't understand. Trapped by this realm of evil, what amazes him most was the thing he was obsessing most about. Why was the lost soul sent here to Phantasma? Standing over the sink, he carefully avoids looking into the mirror at his shadowy reflection as he drank a glass of water to quench his thirst. Splashing his face with cool water, he shut his gleaming green eyes as water dripped off his manly chin. Leo questioned himself in the dark, dim bathroom. Don't be a wimpy, spineless coward. Show some backbone and help this creature. He turned off the tap and walked back to bed. The clock on the nightstand said 12 o'clock midnight. He closed his eyes, pushing the bed covers over his head as the moonlight spilled over the bed sheets. In the quiet still, he did not want to think or listen to his whispering thoughts and paranoia. Putting off his haunting voice until the very next morning, when he is in a much saner mood and can reason more clearly. Seated inside St. Timothy's pews were the deeply religious Abuela Zima and her grandson Leo de Leon, who stood up and walked to receive Holy Communion, facing the magnificent gold altar in the nave of the church. Father Riley was the priest dispensing the small white wafers to his parishioners. While dispensing the hosts, he had vague memories of Leo as a child, and now looking more like a fish out of water, wondering what he might dig up that may offer some surprises from the bully pulpit. He did not abuse his power, but made tough decisions and would accepted criticism. Practically everything about Armada Verduzco is a mystery, Leo explained to his Abuela Zima. Her hand fell upon his shoulder. It sounds to me the stories about Armada are nothing more than tales passed on like stories generation to generation. Yes, there is no real physical evidence yet, but my concerns are theoretical and a possibility. Leo's voice cracked, and he crunched the morning newspaper in his hands. You have the obstacle of time not on your side, Leo. She swayed to keep her balance. Leo de Leon still had to meet the challenge. He had to weight his every move that he made and was under constant pressure at every step. Gathering around the long oval-shaped table, the museum board of directors and shareholders all loved him. A man's man, well dressed and respected by his peers and closest employees. Breaking free from a full schedule of business and a social engagement over at the Metro Museum, under a cloud of spiritual abuse, Leo de Leon faced the local press reporters. They'd all had enough of the church's revelations, strong-arm tactics to beat down the gates of hell. I simply wasn't vigilant enough, and perhaps the best lesson to take away from the mystery behind Salvador Dali's paintings, Leo de Leon remarked, unmoved by any arguments that would challenge him and the art collection. But Dali's painting captures this beautiful woman in the public spotlight, a shrewd and irreproachable reporter asked. I don't harbor any secrets that could give you peace of mind. Except to say her nails were impeccable manicured and she has dark, seductive look. Leo was meticulously when it was called for and merciless careful with the bottom line. He had a flawless mind that way. Still, Leo had to take a deep breath, feeling wary. He would not open himself up completely. Inside the museum, where he felt so uneasy and even trapped, and wasn't at all sure control was a comfort. Just knowing he was safer by saying nothing until he figured out what to do about the skeptics. Unsettled, he broke off the meeting and managed to avoid even a glance at the press agents. Hoping no one saw his fingers white-knuckled from the tension and self-preservation. Chapter 9. The Signpost. In a poetic imagery, there were miles of coast line over Phantasma. It was as if one had cast aside all the comforts of a great society. The rousing sounds of the city waking up, the slapping of shoe leather on the busy sidewalks were the first sign of the morning rush hour. Flocks of pigeon scavengers patrolled the blue skies. No one was in a normal state of mind. It was no homecoming. This was met with mixed emotions by the city's fathers, always in a political battle of their own. The stargazers who stood on its rocky shores at night may have proven a deadly signpost ahead. When a small band of young biologists noticed the nature and bleak weather changes as big black ravens migrated into the city. Was this a metaphor? The sunlight by day and a luminous lighthouse by nightfall? Bring an unexpected crawling and slithering evil that belied up and was waiting to materialize like a dreaded plot. All very unsettling to one's mind, and just around the corner no hope or peace, an imagery of no lasting power, like walking through a disturbing nightmare, trying to earn him something gravely important. What a surprise! A new chronicle for St. RamZ's fight. Seemingly set against him like a tale of historical fiction, or a strange dream he must explore in his sprawling city, a journey of fear and redemption. In the preceding nights, St. RamZ was immersed in the sights, sounds, smells, and tastes as he traversed across the skies of Phantasma. With masked face and sparing eyes, there comes his loud, obligingly laughter out of nowhere. Whether afoot or in the air, he zigzags the city and its man-made 100-story towers. He visits places and sites where its purpose has yet to be fathomed, leaving no detail too tiny to escape his eyes, and wry would abound which finds no charm, or quite heavenly enough. His image had lasting power, like waking through a disturbing mirrored funhouse, trying to warn him something gravely important. Entrusted to the wrong hands would surely bring distraction and fear. Chapter 10. Nowhere to run. When Armada Verduzco went missing, the news people called on a private eye, Paul Armitage and Services. At first they thought she's gone into hiding by herself for over a week. But then the commissioner, Stark, got called to investigate. Clearly there was more to Armada's disappearance than first realized. She had been in the middle of completing the life and confessions of Salvador Dali, the manuscript, the portrait of the man. The heirs were so afraid if published it would ruin their lives, and may have wanted her silenced. In a stifling yawn, the police commissioner, exhausted and hungry, pushed himself past the physical limits of most men his age. Through the daily gloom, the growls of the police dogs deepening among many whinny sounds beneath the towering white-plastered griffin. Standing as a sentinel of justices on the arched entrance to the police headquarters building, now surrounded by pitch darkness, the commissioner and his lieutenant Jeffries found it bizarre circumstances, the timing and motivation, but thought it too unlikely. Shuffling feverishly through tasks of folders and rims of paper which was collected in his handwriting, was there a savage desire for retribution? God, blood with some vengeance, no! Stark mocked. A big black wreath on her door, that's too poetic. Jeffries laughed. This was no occasional fascination of total strangers on the street. Realizing they saw her more than a famous dancer, a unfaithful fumble at that, living on the handouts of VIPs and multimillionaires. There was no modesty or apologies for her wheedle existence. The ensuing publicity had brought a tide of stories. Had she simply been squeezed out by the rich Dali family, due to her extravagantly and most unconventional lifestyle? Still, Armada Verduzco was not an original missing person type case, where she had become a suspected homicide and now famous lawyers want to be part of her defense team, while a young media reporter call out a homicide detective to look into the case. Well enough, it seemed the police had it right. There was no life insurance policy or will. She was not fraught with possible suspects. The only motive and suspicious alibis was on the perceptive truth. This was no publicity stint. Armada had followed Leo's plan to drop out of sight for a while, if only to regain her mental grasp. On the short getaway, Armada drank her tea quietly, and quickly as Leo had down his to settle the plan of action. Highly exhausted, she allowed a bit of a temper to get her best. Armada, the manuscript and her notes, and every word she'd swears to, she shoved into a big fashionable red tote bag. In her flouncing walks she would not worry about the financial malfeasance of Dolly's hysterical Spanish family. Disengaging herself from the mental exhaustion, which was once again lapping at the edges of her consciousness, or she pondered. No longer dazzled by all the glamour of the cheap pink champagne, the press, and the loud club music, her story would read as a nail-biting yarn that no spinster would dare put down at bedtime. Building up a dark tension to a complicated climax, she now held all the cards for the moment. Chapter 11. The Explosive Adventure. Leo may have found himself over his head in a most inhospitable place. Armada had awakened suddenly with conflicted and fragmented memories for reasons that could not be explained. Draped in black and only his eyes showed, the merciful Muhammad the Prophet had come to her in a dream holding a 7th-century large gold saber overhead. He stood most revered and suddenly disintegrated into the darkness of her bedroom. In the suspense, devastated and terrified of her Spanish and Moorish roots, she knew nothing of the Islamic teachings of the Prophet. Suddenly across the room, Armada had seen her own face reflected soulless in the dressing mirror. The face she looked at a few thousand times before, but now no less afraid of her own cheekbones and dark Spanish eyes. In a gasp she stood up, nude, too weak, too frightened to do anything more. Leo had to set aside his differences. They had to work together and ride out this evil force. Despite overwhelming odds, as a way to cope with a series of events so disturbing and inexplicable would present themselves. The following day, new ground rules. Leo had sent a private silver and black Lincoln Town car after her. "You can't discuss your situation with anyone, Miss Verduzco," Leo on the cell phone explained. When she came aboard the De Leon family yacht, not trusting her recollection, like a tenuous thread she sets off in search for some peace of mind. But unsuspecting, Armada herself was falling deeper into a shadowy and sinisterly world. Nodding wryly, she said, "It's very unsettling, isn't it, to learn of other people's secrets? Some secrets, not all, I would guess." Leo sighed. "Most women aren't good at keeping secrets." "Yeah," he offered, knowing squat. Now in the coal-black evening what awaited them was a brazen attack armed with more questions than clues. At the heart of this web there was no wizardry. It was a moonless night beneath Phantasma's darkest of skies. It seemed a set of headlights followed them to the pier. These entities had grown more cunning and violent, but did they disappear without a trace? Inside the yacht, Leo sat down, pulling the evening newspaper open to the front section. Scanning the headlines, he turns to the front page. Armada looked all too puzzled and maybe a little pensive. Stepping away, and before he could turn around to see where she had gone, as if he were looking for answers, he leaned over and grabbed her slender wrist. Leo pressed his lips against her ear and whispered fiercely, "Right here, reporters say you've gone missing." He joked and sat down. "When?" She laughs as the smell of lilacs fills the ship's cabin. "Friday," he said oddly. "Missing how?" she asked, as if she was on the chopping block. "That's all it says. With no signs of a struggle." She glanced over him. "Let me guess." He winked. "Maybe you plain ran away." They both laughed, and hardly finished their thoughts. This was a narrow escape, or just the reporter's confrontation. "You can rule out the Tooth Fairy." Suddenly she witnesses whirls of black smoke curling around her body that reached upward toward the ceiling. Evil seemed to reign. "What just happened?" Leo demanded. "Bloody hell," Armada cried, fraying at the seams, kicking and thrashing, but nothing yields through her tears. They both teetered on the edge of unconsciousness. Now what with all the rumors swirling, Leo feared. Oddly timed. The smoke curled around and through them with a strange intensity. Floating against the ceiling, what were they in the presence of a devilish gray mist playing them for keeps? Please help me, the boat is on fire. Armada cried out from the shock, if she could hold her breath long enough. Her heart began to race uncontrollably with an overwhelming desire to simply escape. While the flickers and sparks of yellow, red, and blue light up before them like fireworks. In seconds they both had been thrown back by the malicious forces at work. To their surprise it was like hell itself, consumed by the massive explosive smoke that had blown the cabin room into a fiery scrap with chunks of debris that left a trail of glowing embers. As a realization spread through their minds, a giddy and rare enthusiasm, the smoke had blackened their faces beyond recognition, adding new meaning to the anticlimactic nature of the evening. Hitting her head, lights flashed before her very eyes as a wave of pain came over her face. She did not pass out with her ears still ringing loudly and head swimming. Armada was relieved to feel a pounding pulse. Leo, this makes no sense to me? What part of it, Armada? Leo sat up, hands to his chest, trying to breathe. He staggered to his feet like a drunk at a happy hour. I guess the whole thing. You mean the raid to get your soul? I don't follow you, Leo. Armada opens your eyes and judge by the swarming smoke around us. So, what? I have no idea. She stared for a moment at Leo. Tugging at his arm, she wrapped herself in his fierce embrace. There was a smell of decay in the air that turned their stomach inside out. The white acrid smoke burned the eyes and jarred their throats for an instant. Paralyzed with fear despite everything they have done. All the warnings were there, squinting from the nasty stench. Her impossible road was all she had to guide her. They seemed outmaneuvered by this haunting force. No way in hell they were going to stay another minute. Leo's face was nothing but intent, stoned and measuring. His recalls were dim of father's visions. They were both lucky to be alive. This makes no sense. He heard her voice bordering on the hysterical and not allowed herself to cry. She was shivering. Leo de Leon was sure she would cave in before long, but was he wrong to expect her to soften so soon? He thought she appeared more in shock than she knew herself in the evil, disoriented action. This was bound to happen. The evil faced, the unbearable price on her head, and no safe place to hide and no crash course in psychology to help. She's still resisting the urges to choose the light to the darkness, and weighing those thoughts carefully and not likely. That was sickening knowledge as she flew under the radar. No time to blink, think, or flinch, however brief in her bitterness. For Christ's sakes! Phantasma was chaotic and needed order. St. RamZ must fight the good fight and was quite aware of it, and would not be put out by her stubbornness. The words of God born out of starvation, Leo's eyes on her face to catch every expression, but her ears were ringing, head swimming and fighting for a breath. Tracing out her life felt like privet little hanging mirrors, shimmering bits and pieces of unfettered light that explored her identity and eliciting irreverent, spine-tingling beings to attack her. It was an unforgettable happenstance, something called fear of evil. They both had stepped into a living nightmare where there were no boundaries. Without a safe place to hide, they were left with fleeting feelings of doom and gloom in the unusual rampage of the triggered event. They had a special connection, like identical twins that finished each other's sentences. For the moment, fear had a sense of self-preservation. Standing in the ecstasy of an entity, was she ready to make the ultimate sacrifice? In this, the finest but disturbing hour. The idea, thought, or reverence, all for somebody, something God. Chapter 12. Messenger from the Light. With everything running afoul, trying to repair relationships between two worlds, the living and the hereafter, Mr. Galilee during rank and file appeared not so much as influential in public service. He had been sent down to earth to be of some assistance to Leo/Saint RamZ and stated, "The rigors and watchfulness of my work was required in Phantasma's 21st century," Mr. Galilee said, standing in the middle of Times Square holding a cell phone to his ear. Across the city Leo de Leon smiled with a cell phone tucked to his ear. "I have the afternoon free, Mr. Galilee. If we can meet at the Metro Museum, I have some work to do there." This was to be a new experience for Mr. Galilee, ridding the subway among the busily of the working class, but soon enough he arrived at the Metro, glaring inside the medieval art gallery. There was such thing as the black arts? He was trying to understand the way for it just on his own, looking at all the apparatus of torture. Mr. Galilee went, "Ho! I have learned sadly. Finally I understand the history, its tone and bluntness of mankind. Well, you have not been sent all this way to discuss the failures of the human race because we have miles to go." Leo de Leon asked to establish their new relationship. "The art critics covered Andy Warhol's tomato can soup painting last month and are now plagued with something very evil from this Salvador Dali collection here at the Metro. It's about Armada facing reality," Mr. Galilee said. "She has no more dreams to fulfill for this sweetly neurotic. You see, Armada Verduzco is completely helpless and needing someone's help. You, Leo, as Saint RamZ, must be the advocate and show her how to connect properly with the community of faith so she may somehow see the light. How anecdotal! You, Mr. Galilee, can easily be fooled by a pretty face. Or look into the eyes of a young handsome man in a flowing cape and a shiny gold halo in tow." Most graciously he condescended. "Ha! You can overreact and believe what you will, Mr. Galilee. Or be a hopeless incompetent that can't distinguish his faith from fiction," he said, mildly huffy. Leo delusively cocky. "I'd be better, smarter and virtuous to leave well enough alone." He winked and crossed his long arms to settle the gentleman's argument. "Mr. de Leon, you vastly overestimate your abilities, or are you no longer a brave heart romantic? You know I once saved your infantile soul for the holy calling of God the Light?" Mr. Galilee smiled in his press-white suit. "Was it a fallacy when I woke up early this morning, to read the Phantasma Times and be troubled by this new American journalism? The enemy of reality, to make the art critics' news on Salvador Dali's mistress the unusual and the spectacular, tainted to sale papers." Leo felt like a paranoid bastard that had to take his first countermeasures one step at a time. "Leo, there's something validating about the newspaper articles and the writings of the artful critics. Don't you see, my boy? You mean I should get a reality check? No doubt Anvil the Dark Angel is well aware of this poor lost soul. He will do everything under his power to possess her. I guess as a mere human I have miles to go. Leo, don't get hung up on biblical interpretations, it's a matter of changing the message." Mr. Galilee thought better. "Sometimes a lost soul comes along who challenges by simply being what they are. Startling, this Spanish creature is no myth, but I can't believe she is a lost soul in a human form," Leo said, with fears of the extreme at the end of the day. Chapter 13. Duty Calls. One morning Mr. Galilee and his most senior advisor, Jasper R., walked into City Hall for a meeting with Mayor Humphreys. He had called the mayor's chief of staff, Whitey Smart, to ask for an audience, and a meeting had been set. Inside the Astor Oval office that smelt of cigar smoke as the men took their seats in the high-back leather-wing chairs next to the mayor's desk, Mr. Galilee began to explain his problem with the mayor's decision. "The fact of the matter, I hate the political agenda of the dark side. I've watched much of the coverage, being invited to City Hall for a reception on the first-month anniversary. At the event of Mayor Humphreys signing the executive order and extending rights to shadow activists. who are criticizing the city government for moving so slowly on anti-religious rights. At this time, Mr. Galilee, you will look back at the people who are looking ahead to the future for resolution as the new year approaches, my friend. Mayor Humphreys laughed him off. It's not too early to mark the calendar for the coming of the new order, my friend. Everything that would be happening with so much evil abound will show what people are made of, and that sometimes may not like what is seen or heard, Mr. Galilee lamented. In a matter of opinion, he was treated and dismissed much like a whim or fancy indulgent. Chapter 14. A Day at the Races. It was to be a balmy afternoon, at Turf Land Park, where all the magnificent thoroughbreds horses paraded along the white fair lawns with their bright colors and jocks in tow. There was a strong competition among them and other owners that fancy up like southern gentility, who sooner would do something to discredit each other in the foray. High up in the privately owned box seats were Armada and Leo de Leon. Taking in the glamour of the racing sport, women abound in wide-brimmed straw hats and sporting plenty of sunglasses. In the pale sunlight filtering through the green awnings, for Armada it was a manically time when she heard the bugler taps. That reminded her of the bull-fighting arenas of her homeland of Spain. But her sadness soon turned to joy when the horses burst out of their starting gates. She had entered the pristine world of the horse racing crowds and the lively loyalist. Their thrill of the run was experienced first-hand by the win and the unsavory taste to the lips. Leo and she ran down to see their 10-1 long shot and winner, Little Cusa. A small red bay quarter horse in full regalia galloped close up. As they hung against the railings at Phantasma's modern horse-track building. When Leo cozied up to a well-known trainer, as he had stumbled into Jeffries, the local breeder and owner in his day, this silver-haired buck and playboy had left many of broken hearts in his path. There were many spurned women, including Leo's grandmother Zimma, a story for another day perhaps. Leo was there because of his interest in Mr. Gill, Jeffries' highly prized black thoroughbred, Wind Blazer. As Mr. Jeffries went swank over Armada with no loose lips, he was always on the prowl, and did not paw on the past and dared not bring up Zimma de Leon. Leo, please bring me up to speed concerning your interest in Wind Blazer? Gill asked cheerfully, falling all over himself. With a good mind and a stout-hearted spirit, Leo was set apart by his family's own wealth. I've always made some discretion on good bloodline choices for the De Leon stables, he boasted with pride. Your new stable manager Mark Barges mentioned your desire to breed Angel Dust and Golden Skirt. Well, yes, my two finest mares, but he is more of a partner in my new breeding operations with the high cost of stud fees these days. And the Jeffries' not so modest ranch sum of money, not being by any standards in this nasty business. Gill joked, knowing of Leo's fascination with the new stallion may have lasted a fleeting second, while he held a long cigar firmly clamped between his lips, smiling at Jeffries like a thorn in the flesh of his heel. Leo knew his heart that Wind Blazer would be a perfect match to his stable. Mr. Jeffries' jockey Buddy briskly ran the black horse around the track. Mounted, he stood on his stirrups as a tough little brat of a man holding a tiny leather whip, showing he too liked being in the hub of any event as the tiny multicolor flags waved over the grandstands. Well, I'll have my veterinarian come by to visit your mares, Gill said with binoculars hanging around his neck to show control. I trust all your horses' medical records and inoculations are in order? He stated. Yes. The flies are the main problem this time of year. Luckily, Leo only has to answer to his God. We all know horses, they always find more ways to hurt themselves, hence the mighty tranquilizers. Gill winked at Armada. In her bemused smile there was self-doubt, as she and Leo walked away through the privately owned bleached white horse stables. While the wild-eyed peering stallions looked eerily at them, she may have had a life of intrigue, terror, and little faith slipping away. Her body language touched a collective nerve. Armada had put herself in a powerless posture. Devastated, of course, she had been depressed for months. If only she had humanly faith, that would be her only weapons against men and foes that wisdom and renowned ferociousness could ensure. Only a fool would tangle with her now. A crushing condition erupted as she strived to heal her past on this sunny day. "I guess by now Phantasma is no American farm town to you?" Leo asked. "Well, when you put it that way, your heart is the size of your fist." In her presence he looked strong and buoyant. To her, Leo was the most prestigious of men and revered at times. His social conduct was deeply seated in a somewhat higher tradition that carried more power than just money. It seemed an honor in the highest order for her to be seen with him. But she had no time to wonder if people might have regarded her to be a serious social climber or a bitch. It was much worse than Gil Jeffrey's philandering and the squandering of his own wealth. Still, she knew she had earned a less than sparkling reputation. Reacting extra sensitive about people laughing and having fun, she remembered that a few joked over their beer and that made her feel better. Focusing on this day, Armada had to surrender her thoughts for the time being. As they both walked away, leaving behind the smell of enriched manure and fresh cut grass in the air. Chapter 15. The Piety. With Father Riley's piety, Armada took the priest's hand. "You poor child, you must not lie to me," the Holy Father said slowly and carefully so that she would understand. "If you dare, you will be damned and burned for all eternity. Your flesh will be torn from your limbs. A torment I cannot even imagine will be applied to you if you do not confess the truth before God Almighty," he begged. "Father Riley, this is no high school reunion for me. Armada, you can't just bring your past back to life or just bury your mistake. Release your soul-crushing secret. You've come on a twisted journey where nothing is what it seems. You've got your heart in darkness and have unhinged evil. Your story should be of redemption. My child, we all have something to hide." Her hands tightened up with his. She muttered something under her breath. Tears formed in her eyes. "I am telling the truth, my new life has been a nightmare." Her breath drew in sharply, following her emotions with a gasp of mingled rage and fear of the unknown. She could not keep the truth buried for much longer. "There was evil doing in your past that threatens you now, but to escape the punishment you've done to yourself. Listen, I know someone close to the bishop in the church. He is Saint RamZ. Father explained in his psychic abilities. But I'm already damned." She pulled away and strode on, then stopped at the exalted arched door and turned, smiling. "I told you the truth. Having arrived on the very ship the Salvador Dali art collection was on, my whole perspective was dim from the start. You can't help me to understand, for there is much betrayal in the presence." Her smile faded. She turned and walked out onto the unforgiving streets of Phantasma, the treacherous landscape and twisted dingy back alleys of her new world. Only the good Lord knows, and I know. Armada barely heard her own crying sound she made. The priest stood paralyzed, staring after her, despite being part of the holy order. True sorrow. Before he gave Mass, Father Riley heard the confession of one of the parishioners' unexpected transgressions. The grieving man was bad enough, but with little left to lose was worse. Now he bears the sign of the cross. The Church atones for their sins, which are more about faith than the transgression of divine law. Father Riley can't change who he is, no matter how hard he tries. He won't betray the man he is. Officially, there wasn't much else he could do. The parishioner was unwilling to talk about his painful divorce because there are just some things a man shouldn't talk about, and never to another man. He had been drinking but felt freedom from his ex-wife, for she was like a ball and chain holding him back. Father Riley knew he was having trouble handling it. That was bad enough, but the confession had left him sick to his stomach. Stepping back from reality, he shrugged away in a drunken rambling, having to sober up. Leaving Father Riley in full view of God and church, unnerved and uncertain as he digs for his keys in the sound of finality. With no idea what else lay ahead, Sister Mary Beth came running in, frowning. "What is in your rush, sister?" He paused and looked expressionless. "Dear Father, we know the devil doesn't always wear horns and a long tail." It gave Sister little satisfaction. Father nodded, most unwilling to admit his own visions were pretty much a nightly occurrence. In the remoteness, to his utter relief, he did not respond. "Father Riley, have you read the morning newspapers? Are you talking about a few meth busts in Phantasma by the police?" "No, couple of runaway teenage foster girls and a missing housewife and a husband who has not seen any sign of her." Sister took a step toward him. "Dear Father, you have not envisioned anything concrete? No names or unfamiliar faces. I know that it must be something creepy, but I don't know what." He wasn't nearly as shocked by the notion as she sounded. "But Your Holiness, you've had these visions before. My skin is crawling if you must know," she asked impulsively. Father Riley mistrusted her and felt terrible the night light and candles gave her a certain gypsy look and manner. "There are some homemade raisin spice cake and hot tea in the kitchen waiting for you." In her rigorous work routine, she summoned him with a hand gesture. Father Riley followed her with his cast-iron stomach ablaze and a stifled yawn. Chapter 16. The Nightmare. Armada woke up panic-stricken from a strange nightmare. She had been on a train on its way to Vienna for a concert. To see a famous violinist playing in a quintet. As she watched him tune the violin calmly and unhurriedly, the music was that of Mozart, the violin sonata. "The sordid truth, I dare not reveal my most vivid, possibly clairvoyant dream," she suggests, as she might be in danger, not knowing that the dark side could be watching over her every move. The nights were filled with partying in Phantasma's drug-infused club scene. While moonlighting as a young and rich heiress, Armada's physical attributes made her a grand success. In her newly endeavor, she was convinced that she was very happy. Although she was determined to write her memoirs of a short life with Salvador Dali the artist, Armada's introspective thoughts indicated that there's more to her than just a woman with a beautiful face and a dancing career. In spite of, she felt, her undoing that dealt with her escaping to America. Her story of a stubbornly unique individual and a great world artist could end after her initial trip to Phantasma. That was brought about by her informal meeting with Mr. Anvil and the dark guiding forces, as she tried to adapt to a life, thinking of this grand city as her new home. Chapter 17. Reflection is good for the soul. The smell of wet ivy on the walls of the church filled the rectory. Leo de Leon turned around a few times, then heard Father Riley make a sound which seemed to be a sigh or a secret laughter. On this night the next morning seemed far away, but Father Riley's kindling cheerful chuckle filled the room. Leo now stretched pleasantly, thinking tomorrow would be a long day. Idly he watched Father as he moved about. He was a big man and stepped lightly for his size. Father's movements were neat and sure. Never fumbling, his red face made him look like he had just stepped out of a steamy sauna. "I remember your late Sunday baths, your damp hair in need of combing, your white nightshirts and your freckled reflection in the mirror, and you sticking out a tongue at it. And you, Father, waving a small military salute with your hand," Leo said, romancing back to his meaningful childhood dreams and thoughts. "During those days you ran as a young lion cub but slept like a newborn lamb in your bunk bed. Those were truly the good old days, my son." Leo wanted to hear better or bad stories but never could tell a thing from Father Riley's expression, and now the big man did not make any reply. "Leo, you have the belief I once had?" Father winked. "Phantasma is still holy ground. Yes, you make sense of it, but there is evil coming. Do not make that mistake, as mine is no mistake," the clairvoyant Father Riley said. Still, I don't see, Father? Leo sighed. Because you must wait it and then see. His words had all the real drama. The long dangling pause could ever give them. You speak to a trip to the dark side? Leo asked half-hearted. More to a journey back to ways of fear we do not know of yet. This will be my new challenge? Leo asked, unsure where most have. Dogged defenders. Miracles happen, but the decision is yours, not mine. But the uncertainty was like a stranger's reflection in the mirror. Father's instinct told him he had more to worry about than the blood on the church doors. For he himself had splashed holy water on the old wooden doors as his own fears did not fade. Yet he was not certain that he was doing right thing in his head. Evil always stacks the deck when dealing out the cards, my son. But if you can see the future, that's my trump card? That's not the point, Leo, he stated, unshackled to his beliefs. Father, I could sure use a drink right about now. Leo thirsted. I only have the church wine, Father said, a bit hesitant. Leo sipped a little of the wine and nodded. And all I thought I had to deal with was the political irritants of the drive-by press media. Yes. I've read all the print in the newspapers, and nobody knows the damage to the church it brings. Even if the front doors were left standing wide open to our parsonage. He flushed. Well, I won't hold my breath to all of this. Leo thought with no rhyme or reason to the church's defense. Father Riley now had to sleep with an unknown fear. He's now a victim of his own psychic babble. That had set the stage for this wicked nightmare. Still, Leo, very engaging man. His new journey would be like some mysterious ride on an ark, but not Noah's or a wise man's folly. Leo absorbed this new information and felt a sick twist of his belly twinge tightly. Stoic Leo stood up and said, Interesting this man, you say? Then directed his attention back to Father Riley's expressionless face, studying him openly. As Leo stood over him, looking bewildered, he had to admit that Phantasma was chaotic and needed him to at least try to impose order on the streets. To wear his horn's halo and fight this evil fight. There were as hell worse things for him to live his life in an unholy pursuit of all evil that is damn. Apparently oblivious to the scrutiny, Father Riley said, Who is wrong to think this man is like the local butcher getting his own prime cut to eat? Leo affirmed, I'd say so. For thy Lord's sake, you have painted a perfect picture for Saint RamZ as I stand before you. Father grimaced and stared at the black iron cross on the wall above them. Sorry, my boy, but I don't mean to be flippant about this matter. I feel as deadweight, no pun intended. Who knows how all this will end for Phantasma? You're no profiler. All this that has happened is really weird and grisly, horrible dream. Father looked at Leo curiously and offered a nod. I'm pissed beyond belief and think I'm going crazy. I'd swear a shrink would have a field day with you. Leo drew a breath. Including their theories and suppositions, he said in the amusing travesty. Yeah, maybe, Father said, except that he had a leaden feeling deep in the pit of his own belly that told him this was only the very beginning. Leo looked a bit worried, which seemed unusual enough, a jolt to his hungry gut and a reawakening to the mind like a laughable comedy skit. The connection caught Father off guard, as queasy as they looked. Pushing aside everything but the job he was faced to do. If anything, Father Riley looked sick. What do I say to the people of Phantasma? He asked with reservations. You don't tell them about this. Not until we know something more? For now, this is kept as quiet as possible. I understand I don't talk to the news media, huh? His face went pale and drawn. We both know we won't keep it quiet for long, Father. Leo's cell phone rang like a 3-alarm fire, and he answered that fast. Yes, Sabula. Are you busy? There was a glee about her voice. You know where I am? His voice sounded harsh, his mind shied as the pendulum of church bells rang back and forth in the background. There was a silence on the other end, then Abila said slowly, "Yes, I know, and I have dinner waiting. Can you come?" "I will be there shortly," Leo said with some tension in the air and despite the gloomy picture. "I'm worried about you, Leo, because I have no way of knowing which parts of my dreams are literal or just symbolic. I think a gun would not help you." Father frowned. "I understand these dreams are difficult to explain. But you have this psychic gift as I have Saint RamZ. Yes, as some terrible evil waits on the both us. Hell, you may have translated what the dreams mean." "Naturally, Leo, every dream has meaning. Mine are not a premonition." There was a pleasantry of emotion across Father Riley's face. Leo was quick to laugh and joke, open but trusting. He was the extrovert. Father was slow to anger and far more introspective than him. Leo must not misunderstand what his dreams meant because of their mental and emotional link they both shared from his childhood. Something most people never value, missing the connection, having chosen different roads in life. Chapter 18. Cafe Society. No one could quibble. It was like looking through a keyhole. The crowds gasped in awe. A cool breeze promoted open-mindedness and acceptance. It was like stepping back into the past. Time celebrating a renaissance of the medieval lifestyle, people seated in shadow along the street in the Cafe Society night. Bonfires burning on the middle of the pavement, as nearly naked men cracked black leather whips, while a skinny acrobatic blonde-haired wench and her muscle-toned male partners contorted their tattooed bodies into amazing positions that forced onlookers to flinch at every toss and flip that braved the air. It had been a day of illumination ectoplasm as partygoers walked around with spilling drinks in hand, people watching the new pop culture decadence and art world. Don Leo de Leon felt like something was watching him. Or was it a kind of selective amnesia about an event from the past but now in the present? He was stuck in front of something he does not want to remember. Shockingly, it was about her secret that could not stay buried forever. She must find the Lord living in a world of denial and evil beings in every direction. Hers was not a regular Cinderella story, as if to say it was part of a master plan that began very simply. He sympathized with anyone who ever struggled in self-doubt and found themselves confronted by naysayers. Armada was passionate about the arts and had received a lot of acclaim from the press. It could not get much better than that. She felt blessed to be part of such a great work of art as Salvador Dali, and now was not eager to return to Spain. Phantasma was another kind of challenge, a pretty intense experience, like going from the Earth to the Moon. Chapter 19. The Grim Reaper. Two worlds on the brink of a staggering deception had taken control. A skeletal figure in a black cloak, the personification of death, this entity, either ghost or gobble, has existed in many societies since recorded history. On an eerie night, walking his dog Spotty through the cemetery grounds, Leo's spirits could not be lightening. There was evil company in the air around them. Sensing the Reaper's presence nearby with two wolf-eyed golden retrievers following behind them, Leo's dog barked, growled, and snarled, making invisible lunges in the dark. She now settled back, neatly licking her paws as Leo quietly assured her that all was well. It was an astonishing debut in the epic scope and suspense of the evening ritual that held the dubious distinction of being the strangest as they vanished without a trace. Spotty had stopped barking. Tipping her ears, she looked Leo in the eyes. There was something almost reverent. "I'm looking. Go ahead, girl." Carefully, slowly they resumed their walk. Leo took a few uncertain steps and recalled something he had forgotten. Stopping at the convent, he addressed one of the sisters in the hallway. "Father Riley can go now, if he wants to," he told Sister Mary on his way home without having to worry about his responsive impressions. He was free, and so were she. Spotty and he will stick together through thick and thin. "As you say, Leo, I will go find him." Sister Mary cheerful replied unconcerned. Her voice had the politeness of a stranger. Reaching his estate, Leo paused at the doorway, pulled off his dark green designer wool overcoat, and walked into his study. His face was full of mischief. He had no time for conversation as he turned on the radio. With his head bobbing up and down until the loud music ended, the parting words came to haunt him once more as he looked into Spot's eyes sentient. "Girl, we are in big trouble in Phantasma. The chickens have all come home to roost." These were the words Leo was saddened to acknowledge even to himself. A red limo service dropped Armada off in front of the Trump Tower Hotel. Outside, she stopped to pat a stray tabby cat sitting on the curb. She bent down and whispered in the yellow tabby's ear. She could not say with lots of confidence, "I don't know who I can trust any more, or if I have another year." "Should I laugh or cry about that?" Armada asked like vital statistic. "I once believed in God. We all were created in His image from a clump of clay." In the listless blight she looked up at the white billowing clouds that gripped the large moon. Every sound in the night was a gasp. The search for the meaning of the transition of her soul wasn't something to kick around, to make sense of the supernatural, and question the way to a little bit of wisdom in life. She felt she was living in a matrix. Everything she knew of her self-existence was in her head now. Completely vested in the present moment, having had a life worth living, she turned alone, walking into the hotel with tears running down her face. In the blowing cold wind there was a loud growl. Armada flipped her flying hair back away from her face, stamping her feet and swing her slender arms to start the blood circulating. She then shouted at the top of her mellow voice and felt good to hear herself. Soon the howls that were following her were plenty rough. If only these devils could be killed, she thought. Chapter 20. The Shattered Veil ***. A bruised violet dusk spread across Phantasma like a vast silk shroud, folding the city into its deepening gloom. The air was still, too still, like the moment before a mirror cracks under invisible pressure. The people sensed it. The dogs sensed it. Even the neon signs along Broadway flickered with a nervous rhythm, their buzz echoing like a dying heartbeat in the hollowed wind. Armada Verduzco stood alone beneath the Gothic archway of St. Timothy's Cathedral. Her silhouette, slender, ghost-pale, and trembling with a faint unnatural glow, looked less like a mortal woman and more like the echo of one. She had not slept in days. Her eyes were rimmed with silver shadows that were not entirely her own. The mermaid's ancient incantation still clung to her spirit like a second skin, and tonight it pulsed against her ribs, insistent, panicked. Something was tearing through the veil. And it was coming for her. Her breath fogged in the chilled air as she whispered to herself, "The darkness hunts faster each night." A sudden ripple, cold, precise, passed over her shoulder. She didn't turn. She knew that presence now. The faint scent of ozone. The hush of featherless wings. The delicate warble of a violin's string dragged against a bough made of bone. "Anvil. You are luminous tonight, Armada," he murmured, voice smooth as glass sliding across marble. "Fear becomes you." She swallowed the rising chill. "Leave me. You can't possess what isn't yours." He chuckled softly, a sound that slithered across the cathedral stones. "Your soul is half mine already. I merely wait for the other half to surrender." A gust of wind swept down the street, carrying with it the toll of distant church bells and a crackling surge of holy static that made Anvil recoil. A beam of white light split the sky above them like a divine blade descending. The cathedral doors burst open with a booming echo. Saint RamZ stepped out, cloaked in the shimmering gold aura of the light. His face was grim. Determined. Immovable. "Back away from her," Saint RamZ commanded, voice resonant with celestial authority. For the first time in many nights, Armada felt a breath of relief. Anvil smirked. So the ram finally descends from his mountain. Their eyes locked, a collision of opposing eternities. RamZ descended the cathedral steps one by one, marble cracking faintly beneath his boots. Armada is under my protection. Whatever claim you imagine you have ends now. Anvil tilted his head in mock curiosity. Tell me, Saint, are you certain she wants your salvation? Some souls bloom best in the dark. Armada felt something tear inside her, a thin invisible thread snapping, sending a tremor through the air. The dark power within her surged, swirling around her limbs like smoke seeking escape. No, she gasped, clutching her chest. Not now. Her knees buckled. The world tilted. The cathedral, the lights, the sky, they all folded inward as if the city were collapsing into a single point. She screamed as a blinding flash burst from her body. A column of swirling black fire erupted upward like a demon's beacon. Saint RamZ lunged toward her. But the blast hurled him backward across the stone steps. Anvil stood still, watching with satisfaction as the dark fire wound around Armada like chains. The veil shatters, little saint. She belongs to the underworld now. RamZ rose instantly despite the impact, fury sharpening his eyes. You will not take her. But he faltered when he saw her face. Armada's eyes had gone pure white, empty, swirling, soulless. And from the sky, something enormous began descending through the tear she'd opened. A wingless colossus shaped from shadow and flame. A creature summoned by her shattered soul. The first harbinger. Anvil's grin widened. RamZ lifted his fist, the ram ring glowing like a newborn star. He stepped forward, ready to confront both demon and destiny. But the voice that emerged from Armada froze him. A whisper layered with 1,000 tortured echoes. Saint RamZ! Don't save me! Run! The creature roared behind her. The ground cracked. The city trembled. And the hunt for Armada's soul entered its final stage. Chapter 21. The Harbinger's Shadow ***. The first scream didn't come from Armada. It came from the city. A long, tearing wail rolled across Phantasma as the Harbinger descended, its shadow stretching over skyscrapers like an eclipse birthed from the pit of creation's earliest nightmares. The air around it warped, bending light, bending sound, bending sanity. Windows fractured without breaking. Metal shuddered without moving. Reality itself twisted under the creature's presence like stretched wet canvas. Saint RamZ planted his boots firmly on the cracked stone steps of St. Timothy's, his golden aura flaring brighter in defiance. The ram ring burned white-hot against his knuckle, the symbol of his divine calling responding to the threat before them. But the Harbinger was not intimidated. It lowered its faceless head toward Armada Verduzco, still wrapped in whirling black coils, her body half lifted from the ground. Armada's eyes remained ghost-white, her breath trapped in her throat, her pulse fighting against something ancient and merciless inside her. The mermaid spell, the failed suicide, the forbidden pact, every thread of her existence burned at once. Anvil basked in it. Beautiful, he whispered. She is becoming what she was always meant to be. A bridge. A beacon. A doorway. RamZ stepped forward. Over my dead body. Anvil turned to him with a smile that never reached his eyes. Oh, Saint, that is the idea. The Harbinger shifted, its molten black limbs unfurling like tar-soaked wings. It pointed a jagged appendage toward RamZ, and the sky split open with a rumbling concussion. A spear of dark lightning tore straight toward the saint. RamZ slammed his fist into the ground. A dome of radiant white light exploded outward, the lightning crashing into it and scattering into a storm of sparks. The force rattled every stained glass window of the cathedral, shards trembling but holding, as if heaven itself tried to shield the holy house. Anvil clapped mockingly. Bravo! You deflected one. The Harbinger raised its arm again. This time 10 bolts fell. RamZ absorbed the impact, halo flaring, his silhouette engulfed in golden fire. But for each strike he blocked, cracks crawled across the pavement like spreading roots. His knees tightened. His breath grew heavier. Armada felt it. Even through the haze. Even through the dark entity clawing at her soul. RamZ, she whispered, barely audible through the roar. The dark coils tightened around her, squeezing the life from her ribs. Her vision fractured into shards of memory. Spain, the Urumia River, the mermaid's silver incantation, the mimic of death she'd escaped only to fall into something worse. Her heart thrashed. Her voice became something raw and desperate. RamZ, please, don't die for me! The saint threw up his hand as the Harbinger summoned a globe of annihilating dark energy, vast, pulsing, hungry. He shouted through gritted teeth. You're not dying tonight, Armada! Anvil's expression changed, subtle, but noticeable. A flicker of irritation. A hint of something like jealousy. He raised his violin case, opening it slowly. The violin inside was carved from bone, pale, fragile-looking, but vibrating with a low, ominous hum. When he drew the bow across its strings, the sounds slithered into the air like a venom. The Harbinger reacted instantly. Its body distorted, trembling in cadence with the eerie melody. The coils around Armada tightened again, pulling her closer to the creature's chest. RamZ shouted, No! Anvil kept playing, eyes half-lidded. She is the lost soul. Her despair is the key. Her heartbeat, the lock. Armada choked, her chest crushing under the Harbinger's grip. The dark melody seeped into her bloodstream like poison, threatening to pull free the last untouched piece of her humanity. The spark she had fought to protect. Her soul. RamZ lunged forward at full speed, golden aura blazing. Armada! Anvil lifted his bow one final time. The Harbinger's chest split open like a monstrous flower. And a vortex of pure darkness yawned inside, sucking the air from the street, pulling Armada toward the void meant to swallow her forever. Armada's scream tore through the city. The vortex roared. RamZ reached out. Anvil smiled. And then, a blinding blast of white fire erupted from a nearby rooftop, slicing clean through the Harbinger's arm. The limb fell and evaporated into smoke. The vortex flickered, shrinking, stuttering. Anvil stopped playing. Everyone froze. Up on the rooftop stood another figure in white. Halo faint. Eyes burning with divine fury. A familiar messenger from the light. Mr. Galilee. He pointed his glowing staff toward the battlefield. Enough. His voice boomed, layered with heavenly authority. This soul is not yours to claim. The Harbinger recoiled. Anvil's smirk vanished. RamZ steadied his stance, aura rebuilding. Armada sagged in the coils, barely conscious but still alive. And as the street shook beneath them, a silent truth settled over Phantasma. The real war was no longer approaching. Chapter 22. The Last Convergence. The night over Phantasma had turned into a ruined tapestry, shredded clouds, torn moonlight, and the lingering echo of celestial fire. The Harbinger staggered backward, wounded but not defeated, its molten fissures leaking rivers of shadow like blood. Even injured, the creature radiated enough raw evil to suffocate a city. But something had shifted. RamZ felt it. Anvil sensed it. Mr. Galilee confirmed it. The balance had tilted. Armada Verduzco hung suspended in the fading coils of darkness, barely conscious. Her body writhed, but her spirit clung stubbornly to the last bright thread inside her, thin, trembling, but unbroken. Mr. Galilee descended from the rooftop in a streak of breathless ivory flame, landing beside St. RamZ, his white suit flickering with residual sparks. "Leo," he said firmly, "you can't fight this creature alone. The Leviathan that hunts her soul has awakened. And Anvil," he cast a cold glance at the Dark Angel, "is no longer just a threat. He is a herald." Anvil bowed mockingly, violin resting against his chin. "I do enjoy a proper introduction." St. RamZ's jaw clenched. "This ends tonight." "On the contrary," Anvil replied, "tonight is merely the rehearsal. The grand finale is moments away. I only require the girl." Armada stirred at the sound of his voice, her eyes fluttering open, her breath shallow. She looked at RamZ and Galilee through a fog of agony. "RamZ, I can't hold it much longer." The saint's heart splintered. He stepped closer, ignoring the scorch marks burning into the ground. "Armada, look at me. Listen to my voice." Her gaze locked onto his, shaky, terrified, but seeking him like a lifeline. Like she had done from the moment he found her in Phantasma's alleys. "You are stronger than this curse," RamZ said. "Stronger than him." He jerked his head toward Anvil. Anvil smirked. "Flattering. But misguided." Mr. Galilee raised his staff. "She is being torn between realms. Her spirit is caught in the rift. If she loses consciousness, she will be claimed. And if she resists too hard," Anvil added cheerfully, "she will burn from within. Either way, she belongs to the underworld." RamZ snarled. "You won't touch her." He leapt forward, fist glowing like a miniature sun, and struck the Harbinger full in its chest. The explosion rippled through the street, sending shockwaves down entire blocks. Cars alarmed. Streetlights shattered. Pigeons burst into frantic flight. The Harbinger staggered again, howling, a deep, void-scraping sound that vibrated the bones of the city. But Anvil did not move. He merely watched, studying Armada like a priceless artifact. Mr. Galilee understood. He's waiting for something. He knows the Harbinger isn't enough. Anvil heard him and chuckled. "Correct." Mr. Galilee narrowed his eyes. "The veil is thin. The city can't withstand much more of this." "Oh, Phantasma?" Anvil shrugged. "Let it collapse. A new darkness will rise from its ashes. And at its heart," his gaze slid to Armada, "a queen reborn." Armada screamed suddenly, the coils tightening, her body arching violently as though invisible claws were ripping her from the inside. RamZ spun around. "Armada!" Her voice tore from her throat like broken glass. "RamZ, the light, it's leaving me." Her limbs shook uncontrollably. Her pulse faltered. The coils tightened. She was slipping. Galilee pushed RamZ aside and slammed his staff into the ground. A ring of blinding white light erupted around Armada, fighting against the dark coils. The light sizzled, clashed, hissed, but held. For now. "Leo!" Galilee shouted. "The only way to save her now is the convergence." RamZ froze. "No. That ritual was forbidden. It's the only thing that can sever the pact she made in the river." Anvil's eyes glimmered with sudden interest. "Oh, this is rich. You would burn the saint's mortal body to save the girl? Delightful." RamZ ignored him. His mind raced. The convergence required sacrifice. His life force merged with divine fire. It would destroy the link between Armada and the underworld, but it would destroy parts of him too. Maybe all of him. Armada's breath hitched. Her eyes found his. Even from across the trembling battlefield, they spoke the words she couldn't say. "Don't die for me." He stepped into the circle of light. I won't lose you, RamZ whispered. The ground trembled as the Harbinger rose for another strike, its massive shadow ready to swallow them all. Mr. Galilee began chanting in ancient tongue, staff glowing like a star reborn. RamZ knelt before Armada, placing both hands on her face. Stay with me, he said gently. But Armada shook her head violently. Tears streamed down her cheeks, glowing silver. RamZ, please don't do this. Her voice cracked. You don't know what I am anymore. I know exactly what you are, he said softly. Someone worth saving. A flash of raw, emotional agony crossed her face, but she could not stop him. Because the ritual had already begun. Galilee's staff shot a beam of light through RamZ and into Armada, binding them together in a blinding celestial thread. The coils screamed. The Harbinger shrieked. The sky cracked open above them. Anvil stepped back, his smirk evaporating. No, he whispered. No, not that. The light surged. Armada's soul flickered. RamZ's aura exploded. And then, a massive blast shook the entire city, flattening the street in a pillar of white fire. The convergence had begun. And there was no turning back.